If you look to user satisfaction, the question was, are you happy with your connection? And about 50 or even more than 50% of the FTTH users says, I like it very much. You can't find anything even close to that for any of the other access technologies. About 78% says, it's clearly above average, why I like it very much. So the user satisfaction is very fantastic. So I tend to think that fiber is a bit like, next generation of HD TV screen or, faster laptop. Once you have experienced it, you like it, then you will never go back. So the FTTH experience is very clear. Once you have it, you will notice it. But then where comes the broader question? Could we find some socioeconomic benefits? User satisfaction is maybe not the most important one. The important ones were, is it about employment, for example? Do we find higher rates of employment? Can we counter urbanization? What about e-health? And a lot of these metrics which they measured. And generally speaking, the picture you will find is that there's a clear link between the socioeconomic benefits and the investment model, and also geographical segmentation. So in the Stockholm area, the capital of Sweden, there are not very significant socioeconomic benefits of FTTH, although FTTH exists. But in the smaller villages like Kilafors and Lindafallet, really small places, there you can find enormous differences where people actually have reversed urbanization, where they do this kind of e-learning and e-health. And so that exists in these small parts of Sweden. And this is somehow also coupled to the public investment, because for these small places in Sweden, there has been a lot of stimulus packages. So bottom line, yes, public funding is a good idea, because FTTH generates socioeconomic benefits. But the geographical segmentations is a smart idea, because not everyone is the same. And specifically in these underserved areas, the socioeconomic benefits are more emphasized. Now, let's talk a little about speed, and why do we need fiber? Another thing we did within the FTTH Council in Europe, in the Market Intelligence Committee, was to understand, is the usage of fiber different from a kind of capacity point of view, and how much megabits per user is actually being used? And again, they compared FTTH users with non-FTTH users, and the pattern was two things. FTTH users use about 3 times more capacity than other users on DSL, for example. So 3 times more. And the second thing that came out from that study was that the bandwidth increase per year is about 20%. It's not 50%. You'll probably hear sometimes that they say that the bandwidth increases 50%. That's the backbone. And the reason for it increasing 50% in the backbone is because A, the capacity increases per user, and B, number of users increases. But if you separate these two effects and only look to the access line, you will find that more 20% is better number probably when it comes to increasing bandwidth. If you start to model that and look into what type of services this would generate, you'll probably get a graph like this, where we today have a lot of standard definition TV, but go to high definition TV and so forth. So we move away from the 20 megabits domain we have today, more towards 50 megabits in 2030. This can of course be discussed, but this fits very well with this 20% compound annual growth rate. And I tend to like what Sony tells you about it. We asked Sony, do you need fiber? And what Sony said was written there, give us the glass and we'll break it. Give us the glass and we'll break it. What do they mean? They mean that if they have fiber, they will fill it up, and they will even break it. They'll probably use more than the capacity they have. So again, if you give them the big pipe, they will use it, as we also saw from the previous slide. And as you notice here in the Alcatel-Lucent booth, outside here and also at the council, one of the trends here is going to high definition TV and even 3-dimensional TV. So one of course, the streaming media with high quality content is one of the drivers going to these high capacities. So have a look at the 3D TV. It's a reality that exists. Okay, that was about why. Now let's talk a bit about how. And I want to talk about the concept of eco-efficiency, which is the combination of eco-friendly and operational efficiency. What is the impact of fixed access on the environment? To begin with, there's a kind of urban myth. The urban myth says that the impact of IT or ICT industry is about 2% of the total environmental impact. which is right, and that is at pair with aviation, which is wrong. And this story comes from Gartner. Gartner is a very well-known analyst firm, but here they made a mistake. And what was the mistake? Well, the 2% impact of ICT is based on a full life cycle analysis. From you make the product, you use it, you decommission it. That's how you should tackle the problem. The 2% for the aviation industry is only the fuel for the plane. That's not the full product life cycle. So it's not fair to say that ICT impact is the same as aviation. But it's true that ICT impact is about 2%. And in 2002, the total impact of ICT was 0.5 gigaton carbon dioxide equivalent. Oh, that's a difficult one. What does it mean? You try to translate all the different impacts into one metric, which is carbon dioxide. But of course, not everything is carbon dioxide, but in order to compare. And the interesting thing you see here is that in 2002 it was 0.5, in 2020 we expect it to be 1.4, so it increased the factor of 3. So that's alarming. If you look into what you find in the home, in data centers and telecom, you'll see the ratio remains almost the same. So about 25-30% is telecom, about 14 to 20% is data centers, and the rest is in the home. So clearly the home is the important part. So if you want to be green, turn off your TV. I mean, that's where you really make a difference. That doesn't mean that we from the network side will do our best, of course, to counter this problem, but it's really the home appliances, the home devices, which is really the problem area. But if we dig a little more into the telecom numbers, because that's where we are working on, you'll find the following. In 2002, about 1% of the 2% was related to fixed access. 1% or 2% is really not very significant. But there is a trend here going to 2020 that this will increase to a factor of 4%. So of course, ICT increases impact by a factor of 3, and fixed access on its side increases that part by a factor of 4. So that's a factor of 12 in total. So of course, something is happening. It's not strange. There are more and more users on broadband networks, and secondly, we use it for much more purposes. But nevertheless, this is a trend which we should address. That was the bad news. This is the impact. Now, remember one number here, 1.4 gigaton carbon dioxide equivalent. That's the impact. That's the challenge. What is the opportunity? Well, this is the opportunity. I said 1.4 gigaton carbon dioxide equivalent. The opportunity is to save 7.8 gigaton carbon dioxide equivalent. So that's a factor of 5 more. So the services we run on top of this type of network, or ICT generally speaking, can actually outpace the impact by a factor of 5. This is the opportunity. So ICT in itself can be a very positive thing for the environment if you use it correctly, but you have to provide the right service. If you look to which type of services you can run on top of an ICT environment, you'll find that roughly 53% of them are related to some kind of network. The rest is not really network related, like transport optimization has nothing to do with the network. But specifically 2 things, there are 4 things stands out. Smart grids, smart buildings, teleworking, and video conferencing.